Hello, everybody. It's almost inauguration day in the United States, so I am ready to go into the Twilight Zone, and I hope that you are. So, Donald Trump recently posted on his Truth Social that he thinks that the UK is making a mistake by building a lot of offshore wind farms and by closing down their North Sea oil production. And there's a lot to unpack here. So first, let's see what is written. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Friday criticized the British government's energy policy with a demand the country open up the aging North Sea oil and gas basin and get rid of wind farms. So when the UK basically started this whole age of fossil fuels with their coal-fired power plants, we were poised to become to basically start nearly everything in the world, right? So what we started was the exploration for gas. We were rich enough that we could build massive contraptions that we could build on the sea and basically stick a straw down down the Earth's crust and start producing all this oil. And Norway does this, Denmark did this, Scotland and the United Kingdom did this, and the Netherlands did this. I don't know if Belgium did this because Belgium is not that big of a country. So we're no strangers to oil and gas production. In the Netherlands, for instance, if we look at the onshore stuff that happens, we have a fairly large reserve of natural gas all the way in the north. And down in the south, we have a lot of coal. Now, we stopped producing coal in the 1960s. We closed down all the coal mines. And as a result, what happened was that a lot of poverty came to this region. It's in this region where I live right now. So the government, they basically built a lot of government institutions here in order to make sure that a lot of people kept work. Now, the oil and gas exploitation still continues in the North Sea. I believe that the Netherlands still has some activities there, the United Kingdom has some activities there, and I'm pretty sure that Denmark and Norway also extract fossil fuels in the North Sea. Now, my take on fossil fuels is quite simple. I don't like them. I don't like them because of the air pollution. I'm not talking about CO2, but real air pollution, the particulate matter that comes out of these internal combustion engines. Do I think that we should use stopping fossil fuels? Yes. Do I think that we should stop using internal combustion engines? No. I do believe that if we have sufficient electricity, energy, heat, that we can produce synthetic fuels. One of my best friends in the world is working on a synthetic fuel production company. So they want to produce sustainable air fuels, for instance. So that's the first thing. Yes, I do think that we should stop extracting fossil fuels from the North Sea. Do I think that we need to stop doing that tomorrow? No. Do I think that we need to stop doing that because we want to build windmills? Absolutely not. Personally, I dislike windmills with a passion. I will be quite frank about that. But I'm not going to chain myself to a fence in order to stop somebody from building a windmill somewhere because I do understand that we need a lot of energy. One of the things that I believe is at play here, and this is what basically is outlined by Keir Starmer, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Labour government won last year's elections with a pledge to build Britain's low carbon economy. The government aims to quadruple offshore wind generation capacity by 2030 to 60 gigawatts as part of goals to lower carbon emissions and improve air quality. In October, the British government said it would increase a windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas producers from 38 to 35% and extend the levy by 1 year. The government wants to use the revenue from oil and gas to raise funds for renewable energy projects. Oil and gas companies have said that the higher tax could lead to a drop in investments. Some companies have sold assets while others merged operations and sought to diversify to other regions. So what I'm going to show you right now, and I'm sorry that I'm typing this as we speak, is that over here we have the port of Rotterdam, right? The port of Rotterdam is one of the largest ports in the world. As you look, you don't have to zoom down, you don't have to zoom in very far in order to see what is going on here. You can see all these circular things over here. And all those circular things basically hold either crude oil or some sort of derivative of crude oil. And in very limited cases, there may also be some natural gas in there, some liquefied natural gas or some regular natural gas. It's in a gas form. But most of this is simply oil. And if we zoom in, what we can see over here are refineries, right? So you got the oil and the crude. What you want to do is you want to extract different forms of fuel out of them. You have diesel, you have gasoline, you've got ethanol, methanol. There's loads of different fuels that you can extract from this. So I believe that over here, Gunvor Energy, right? There's a refinery over here. This one has been closed. This one has been closed thanks to the pressure of, the increased taxes, the increased carbon tax, all this stuff, all these people saying there is no future for fossil fuel infrastructure in our countries. And if you look at just the scale of all these activities over here, it's enormous. So zooming out, what you get over here is the North Sea, and this is basically the place where all these fossil fuels are extracted. So what is going on right now? We have this fantasy that if we build a lot of offshore wind farms, and we're planning to build 300 gigawatts in total as the EU, I don't know if the United Kingdom is counted towards these goals, and if they're not, then we are planning to build 360 gigawatts of offshore wind in this beautiful natural place. And in the meanwhile, what we're saying is fossil fuels have to go. We can't use fossil fuels anymore. Now, we have no plan in place in order to transition to synthetic fuels. That's the first problem. We have no real tangible plan on how to transition from our fossil fuel processes to electrified processes or to processes that are powered elsewise. So this is a huge problem. This is a big problem. And to get back to Trump, because there's loads of things that he says that I disagree with. There's loads of things that he says that I think he is completely wrong. But a broken clock is right twice a day, and in this case, he might be more right than just twice a day. Do I think that the UK should stop producing fossil fuels within 10 years? I don't think that they should. Do they have to stop building offshore wind farms within the next 10 years? I don't think that they should do that either. I think that they should continue building out their offshore wind farms, but not at the rate at which they are going. And I think that they should consider setting a cutoff point. So one of the things that I am pretty passionate about is nature and biodiversity. So over here, this is a Dutch website from the Dutch government. So here we have the coastal birds of the North Sea PDF. Here we have the seabirds of the North Sea PDF. And if we go down here, we see the porpoise protection plan, right? Now let me open all these different PDFs so that we can see what is happening. So the conservation plan for the harbor porpoise. And the interesting bit is that over here, what you see over here, this picture over here, I mean, we used to hunt these creatures. Now the porpoise, the poor creature you see living here, is like this miniature dolphin, right? It's a miniature dolphin, and there's about a couple of thousand living over here in the North Sea. I know that I believe that there's like 2,000 living over here in this area over here alone. And it's forbidden to build windmills here, and that's because it's a nature reserve, right? This is like the biggest nature reserve in the Netherlands. There's also one over here, but over here, this sea between the mainland and these islands over here, that's also a nature reserve. And there's seals living there. There's these porpoises living there. Loads of mammals and seabirds and fish that live here and down here in the sea, because it's basically their home. That's the place where they live. So the porpoise is one of these creatures who does a lot by hearing. We all know that these whales, they are these natural sonar animals. They live by sending out sound and listening to what returns, right? The echoes. So if we want to build uh, an offshore wind turbine, then we have to first drive this huge pile into the ground, right? So what happens is you take a huge weight and you get this pile and you hammer that pile into the ground. That's how it's done. You need a pile driver and it then drives it down into the ground. So this creates a lot of hard sounds. And these porpoises, they get disorientated. And in the worst case, their hearing might even get damaged. So now, I don't want to come over as this bleeding heart for the porpoises, right? Because I'm not really one of these people who wants to chain himself against, to a fence somewhere in order to stop something from happening. But I do think that we really need to take into consideration what we're doing over here, right? So if we look at all these coastal birds, if we look at all these water birds, these seabirds, right? I mean, there's puffins over here, and I mean some of these, there's seagulls and there's albatrosses and God knows what flies around in there. It's not like I'm the guy who's most knowledgeable about birds. But if we want to build 360 gigawatts of offshore wind in this natural area, that's going to have repercussions for the sea life and the wildlife that is there. So that's one of it's not a major concern of mine. I'm not a hypocrite, but I do care about this enough that I want to at least say it out loud. I do think that we need to take into consideration and really think about, is this a good plan or not? So let's get back. This is also something that I touched on earlier. North Sea oil decline. We can't have a repeat of what happened to the 80s miners. What I just told you, I live in an old mining community. We stopped mining in the 60s. And in order to make sure that the people here got good, decent jobs, we basically got a lot of government institutions that came here in order to make sure that people could, transition from being a miner or being in the mining industry to having a government job, in essence. And right now, what we're noticing right now is that these jobs are leaving. These jobs are now moving back to, the West, to The Hague, to Amsterdam, to Rotterdam, because that's where the most money is made. So this is, again, a real problem that is going on in this neighborhood. That's why I am trying to advocate to build a couple of nuclear power plants in my neck of the woods, and to couple that to some industrial activity in order to make sure that we don't lose a lot of jobs. Now, if we go back to this map over here, if we go, oh, let's see, I need to find Blythe. Where's Blythe? So over here we have Sunderland, right? So over here, here's Blythe, right? There's a lot of offshore stuff that goes on here. Then we can go to Aberdeen, which is all the way over here in the north. Well, Peterhead should be good as well. I mean, this over here, there should be a lot of offshore activity going on over here as well. Peterhead, Aberdeen. Let's see, where's Aberdeen? Usually I don't have much trouble finding it. It's over here. right? Aberdeen. So a lot of the offshore industry is concentrated over here in Scotland. There's also some fisheries, but as you can see, all of this stuff here. I mean, it's there's loads of people working on these rigs in the North Sea, making good money, earning honest pay. So I do believe that we need to keep our fossil fuel production up, and I do believe that we need to keep it up, near here in Groningen, where we stopped producing natural gas, over here in the North Sea. Not because and this is something that I try to explain this way, because nuance is important, right? Our economies rely on fossil fuels, whether we like it or not. And it's not like we're going to shut down, it's not like we're going to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels within the next 10 or 15 years. It's just not going to happen. The scale of our fossil fuel usage is simply too big. So in this case, I'm going to grant this to Donald Trump. I think that Donald Trump is right. You shouldn't stop producing fossil fuels at this stage. Now, whether you should produce fossil fuels indefinitely, that's a whole other question. I would definitely say no. I hope that by 2050 we can close all fossil fuel production in the world. Let's say in the North Sea, and in the United Kingdom, and in Norway, and in Germany, and all these European places. But what I really want us to do is to go to these sustainable fuels, sustainable air fuel, synthylene, synergetic. I mean, this is what we really want. This is what we want. We need these fuels. We're never going to fly without these fuels. And keeping all the cars on the roads without these fuels is also going to be impossible. And there's a load of people who are going to say, "Damn it, man. Electric vehicles are the future. We're going to drive electric vehicles." All of us. No, we're not. Check out the other videos that I made about electric vehicles. We're not going to drive electric vehicles. All of us are not going to drive electric vehicles. And we're not going to reach a saturation point beyond 50%. I'm not talking sales. I'm talking about the global fleet before 2050. It's not going to happen. Neither are we going to live on Mars, for those who think that is going to happen. So, what else? What should we do? Because I don't think that we should build 360 gigawatts of offshore wind, right? This is my pitch. I believe that we should be able to build a gigawatt per million people by 2050 in all the countries surrounding the North Sea. And that looks like this. So over here, there's 70 million people in the UK. So the UK builds 70 gigawatts of nuclear capacity. There's 5 million people living in Norway. So there's 5 gigawatts of nuclear capacity being built in Norway. There's 10 million people living in Sweden. So we built 10 gigawatts of nuclear power in Sweden. And they're going to do more than that. They have a goal of adding 10 gigawatts, if I'm not mistaken. Then there's 5 million people in Denmark. So they are going to build 5 gigawatts of nuclear power. There is 80 million people in Germany. So they built 80 gigawatts of nuclear power. There's it's 18 million, but I'm going to round up. I'm Dutch. I like to take some responsibility here. There's 20 million people living in the Netherlands. So we are going to build 20 gigawatts of nuclear power. And then there's 10 million Belgians, and they are going to build 10 gigawatts of nuclear power. Now, why do I say this? Now, welcome to my world. This is one of my hobbies. I take real production data. This is real production data from Germany. I look at what is the delta. Then I'm going to show you, okay, what would happen if there was absolutely no nuclear power in Germany, but with the planned capacities, right? So they are planning like 100 gigawatts of onshore wind and 70 gigawatts of offshore wind and 220 gigawatts of PV. And if you then add 69 gigawatts of batteries, then you get this picture. You've got zero shortfall. right? If I go over here, unfortunately I can't. I have to sign in, and on this computer I can't. But in any case, this is something that I do in order to create optimization models, right? And these optimization models, I basically say, okay, what happens if we add 25 gigawatts? What happens if we add 50 gigawatts, right? And what you see is that the need for offshore wind and onshore wind and PV goes down. So in this beautiful file here, unfortunately, it's a lot of data to show. What I basically done is I doubled the demand from Germany. I doubled the demand for Germany, and I said, okay, what if we would build 300 gigawatts of wind, offshore wind in, you know, 300 gigawatts of offshore wind in the North Sea. And what would happen if we would couple that to the German demand, but we double the demand as what it is today? I'm not going to stretch it out, make it loopy that the uh, peaks are higher and the bottoms are lower. I just added a bulk of um, a sizable bulk of demand underneath, because otherwise I would have to write again a whole new algorithm, and it doesn't doesn't work that way. So I have modeled 300 gigawatts of offshore wind, and our maximum demand is 158 gigawatts if Germany's demand were to double, right? What you would get is sizable gaps. So you see all these white spaces over here. Those are spaces in which there's no electricity stored, and you basically are out of luck. You don't get any electricity. Now, all of this data comes from the Dutch offshore wind production factors, right? So these are relatively good figures to have. I'm not being negative here. This is not based on onshore wind or anything. This is based on real data. So you can see the shortfalls are really sizable. If I zoom in, I mean, this is a crap way of doing this. If I do it like this, let's see. Let's hide this here, because this I can't. All right. So you could see the gaps. You could see the dark purple over here. That's when there is actually something stored, and the storage can pick up. So this is what happens when you have 360 gigawatts of wind, and you couple that to a German demand curve, which has been inflated. Simply can't get done. Now we take the same demand curve and we optimize. We're still using some backup, as you can see, right? And what you get is you need 141 gigawatts of nuclear. So 141 gigawatts of nuclear basically means that you have 0 hours in which no demand is met, in which the which means that there's 0 hours when the demand is not met. So the demand is always met. So 141 gigawatts does the trick. Now here we go. If every country would add 1 gigawatt of nuclear per million people, and we take these countries that surround the North Sea, Germany has 80 million, the UK has 70 million, the Dutch have 20 million, the Swedes have 10 million, the Belgians have 10 million, Norway and Denmark each have 5, right? Norway and Denmark, yes. Norway and Denmark each have 5. Then you get up to 200 million. So if you build a gigawatt per million people, you get up to 200 gigawatts of power, right? If I would put this number to 200, then you would need 0 offshore wind capacity. Offshore wind would not be needed for our electricity needs. Now, would this be enough to produce all the synthetic fuels that I just spoke about? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe we need more thermal reactors, high heat reactors like molten salt reactors in order to get that done. But with those 200 gigawatts, with this 200 gigawatts of nuclear power that we would have built, I am pretty sure that we would have a lot of electricity. to go around for these 200 million people. Probably enough. Probably enough. Probably more than enough. But that's one of the problems that we're facing, because if we look at, the balance between electricity and fossil fuel usage, primary energy and electricity, primary energy and other stuff that we do, then you can see that we have a problem. So the interesting thing is, just look at this Sankey diagram over here, for instance, from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Now, this is from 2011, but don't worry. I mean, if we take the one from previous year, the end result won't be much different, right? So you've got 10,500 petajoules of fossil fuel power input over here. Biomass is not counted, otherwise it would be 10,750 petajoules. And what happens is, the energy services is only 3,000 petajoules, right? That's not just that's everything, because electricity is only 3,200 petajoules, right? It's a third. So a third of all this stuff goes into electricity, and only a third of all the stuff gets used effectively. Now, as you can see, there's still some inputs and everything. So what you get is electricity then gets fed into residential, commercial, industrial, transportation, right? And there's a little bit non-energy there. And then what you get as end result is that you use 3,000 petajoules effectively, and you're wasting 5,100. Now, you also have exports over here, so the 10,500. If you would, obviously this gets you up to 8,100. You put 10,500 in, more 10,700, almost 11,000. So the exports over here, all those exports, you have to count them all up and then subtract with this over here. And then you get 8,100 petajoules that were used in the UK, 5,100 petajoules were basically wasted. And all of this is stuff that comes from fossil fuels. Now, the reason why we waste this is not because we like wasting things. The reason why we waste it is because that's how our economy is built up. We use electricity in inefficient ways. And it's not easy to go from an inefficient way of using electricity or energy to an efficient way of using electricity or energy. And many people would like you to believe that electrification is the answer to all things, but it's not. It's not. That's why I talk about sustainable fuels, for instance. You're not going to see, we're not going back to the age of the sail ships, the ocean liners that only had sails. It's not going to happen. Sure, you can find some idiot billionaire who built a new modern sail ship and who was cruising across the oceans and the seas in order to show, yes, look, we can power our ships with wind. But the reason why we stop powering ships with wind is because the wind isn't there. On occasions, if there's no wind, then your ship is going nowhere. And those ships aren't going to be powered electrically, because storing electricity is an inherently inefficient way of doing things. You need batteries, or you need to put it into hydrogen. Storing hydrogen is very inefficient, because you can't store a lot in a cubic meter. You need large volumes of hydrogen stored in order to do anything useful with it, especially if you want to do it electrically. Otherwise, you're going to burn it. And if you burn it, well, Bob's your uncle. Rejected energy, still a thing. And that's just the reality. That's just reality. Moving stuff takes a lot of energy. Yes, we can move stuff using electricity. We do that in the Netherlands with all our rail lines are electrified. Now in Germany, they have one of those train lines in the north, from Berlin to the sea somewhere, I believe that it is, where they don't have any overhead electrified rails. So they still drive with diesel. These are diesel powered trains. Now, I believe that they wanted to do a hydrogen powered train. that train has been taken out of commission. It was used, yes, but there was not enough H2 to go around. The train, I mean, if there's no H2 on board, you stop driving. It's basically that sad. So that trail line is still being serviced by trains that run on fossil fuels. And that's why Trump is right. We can't stop producing fossil fuels at this moment because the transition that we try to envision, we want it so badly, this electrified future, this hydrogen future, it's not going to happen. It's a dream. It's a mirage. That's it. If you want to transition away from fossil fuels, you need something else to offset the fossil fuels. You need chemical fuels. You need liquid fuels, preferably, right? Gaseous fuels are less efficient because you need to pressurize them. Either you need to pressurize them or you need a very large storage volume. So liquid fuels, that's what we need. And the only way to get there is by using sustainable fuels, by making sustainable fuels. And the only way to get those is to have an abundance of energy. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 200 gigawatts in northwestern Europe isn't enough. Maybe we need 300 gigawatts to build all these sustainable fuels. And yes, maybe we even need some wind to get this done. And maybe we need even some PV to get this done. Some people would say, now you're losing me because you're talking about the end of fossil fuels. And ending fossil fuels is dumb because of CO2 is not a problem and such. That's a whole other debate. In any case, if you want to support the channel, please become a member at Patreon or become a member of the channel. Please leave a comment down below because there's a lot to talk about. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon. I try to make videos at least every week. And that's all. Thank you all for watching and may the strong force be with you. Bye-bye.